Last evening I was in a really trippy mood and I made this beat. I know what you're all thinking. This is just like the meme where someone makes a beat at night and feels like, that's the best beat on earth. Next day they wake up and it's like, I am a beat. And you're like, what? That's not how I remembered it to be. But I was already aware that this sounds weird when I made it yesterday evening. So it is justified. Still, I will use this beat now. I find this beat pretty cool, despite its confused feeling. We'll talk about a new plugin that was released by Rex Baserfield with this beat as an example. The plugin in question is called Extortion. There is something special about this plugin, you know. It is a distortion plugin, just like you would expect from something that has a harmonics knob and a guitar on the interface. But there is something really unusual about it. Can you see what it is? I give you a little hint. There is something missing on the interface. Something that you would usually have in a distortion plugin. And it's not missing because Rex Baserfield forgot to add it. It is missing because it wouldn't make sense in this particular distortion plugin. Can you see what it is? I want to know in the comments if you thought about the thing that it is. And now I will tell you what it is, which is a gain input parameter. Normally distortion plugins have a gain input parameter because at some point the signal starts to drive into the distortion, like when you have a saturator and the signal goes up and down on it, and sometimes it reaches the point where it starts to bend the waveform, in which case it adds distortion. However, this plugin uses a Waveshaper that was designed to sound the same on all dynamics. So it doesn't matter how dynamic your signal is. It could be something that has extremely quiet parts and extremely loud parts, and it would all distort exactly the same. It's such an unusual thing to have, and it's actually something that I always wondered about. I often dislike when distortion does this thing where it just suddenly sounds very different when something gets just slightly louder. I always want this transition to be somewhat smooth, and this plugin basically makes this transition endlessly smooth, infinitely smooth. Rex Baserfield could have basically just released this whole plugin with only these two parameters, and I would still love it. Maybe I would love it even more then, because it would be more straight to the point. The pre and post filters are cool too, but still, that's how insane it is. And now, without further ado, let me show you what it does to this kick. So a kick isn't even a very dynamic signal, but it does get quiet at the end of the sound, and it does that pretty quickly. And I think you can kinda hear it in the sound of this distortion, that no matter how much this kick approaches the lowest point of its volume, it just has the same texture on it throughout the entire sound. It doesn't sound like distortion, it changes just the texture. I would much rather call it a Texturize plugin than a saturation plugin, even though it is saturation. What do we have here? Okay, that sounds a little bit more subtle, but the reason for that is because there are a lot of post effects going on here. Let's just look at this little chain here. So do you hear that? This was actually a signal with different signal levels, and it was always the same kind of crunch on all levels. It's just such a weird feeling to hear that. I always wondered if this is even possible at all, and suddenly it exists. That's pretty cool. So this is a great example of how you can turn down the exponent knob to make things just infinitely smashy. Things get smashed so hard when you do that. Let me real quickly just do that with the entire mix before we go on with BLDH2, so that you can hear what I mean. Okay, I don't want to keep it on the master. It's a little bit much, and I'm also not sure if it's even oversampled at all. Let's just go on with the next layer of whatever is going on here. Yeah, so here I had a hi-hat and I just decided to make a little layer so that I have like a layer that is extremely smashed and just a normal layer. Yeah. So yeah, I went the other way around because I wanted to have a sound that is a little more punchy instead of smashy. So you can just go over one with the exponent. Easy peasy. Oh, here I actually put two extortions in parallel. So let's see. The first one tries to be the punchy one, goes up with the exponent. And the lower one smashes it. Nice. What do I have here? Yeah, it just texturizes the percussion. As easy as that. Now here we have an instrument layer with a lot of instruments. Nice warm Rhodes piano with Extortion. Easy peasy. Synth 1, Extortion. Now that's also one of the nice reasons why Extortion is so great. You can turn down the sustain on all of these kind of things in your synthesizers so that you can get a sound that is very dynamic in itself already. You don't even have to play around with velocity and stuff. Just make something plucky and then you can slap Extortion on it, and Extortion will just enhance the quality of this dynamic so much, because it's such a synthetic and perfect dynamic that texturizing it with Extortion just gives you a feeling that you cannot get from the other distortion plugins because of their rough thresholds. This is definitely a distortion type that should be available in synthesizers directly in the future. That's something that I wish for. So what do we have here? JP6K. Oh, this layer is currently muted. Why? Ah, yeah, I remember. I wanted to use this layer later as some sort of automated thing in the next part, and then it would have this nice combo of pro cues that post EQ the Extortion to just give me specific parts of the signal. Felt like that has kind of a nice shoegazy vibe or anything. What is this? Oh, my bassline. So this bassline basically consists of two riff feedback lights which have the feedback turned up higher than 100%. That's why it resonates to infinity. I turned it off for this part though by just using the tool after everything, and there is an FX layer, and one of the layers has Extortion in it. So one thing to note here is that I added a tool before Extortion to turn down the width to 0%. I did that because I remembered that when this plugin was released initially, it only processed everything in mono, because the developer thought people would just use it on guitars. But then Rex Basserfield was convinced to actually re-implement it in stereo. However, I had already tested it when it was only mono compatible, and I already found the sound pretty cool like that. So I remembered that and just decided to put this stereo version of the plugin to mono on purpose here to get the original Extortion sound rather than the one that we asked for after the release. So what do we have here? Synth 1. So we have the second oscillator in this instance of synth 1 on plus 19, which is an octave plus 7. And you know, when you're layering a sound with just 7 semitones up and the same melody, then it just sounds kind of fancy, which is the idea of this patch. And I think whenever I turn on Extortion, I can hear that plus 19 more. It just glues together immediately. It's just beautiful. Let's look at the second instance of synth 1 here. Okay, so the second instance initially sounded like this. And that was a little bit flat, so I decided to add another layer that I started off with supermodal. And at the end there is a chorus to make it a little bit more watery, but in between there is Qualcomm Extortion. And I think on this sound in particular, it just makes the overall impression a little bit softer. The sound puts itself more into the background, but it's rather subtle. So this beat might be rather silly, but Extortion is extremely cool and you should try it for sure.